Okay, welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you this evening on our online peer mediation platform webinar. And I am tickled to have a friend and colleague, Ondine Gross, with us tonight. And I'll introduce her in a moment. But first, I would like to share with those who are watching this recording a little bit about the online peer mediation platform and what we are. So let's see if we can talk a little bit about us. Ondine, do you see a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. So this is the online peer mediation platform. We were a grant-funded project back in 2014 to 2016, and then we were taken over. Well, I won't say taken over. That sounds really kind of like somebody forced us to join them, but we were graciously taken over by the National Association of Peer Program Professionals. Here are our team members, and I'm so proud that Ondine is on our team. She joined us as our latest member, and we've been really pleased to have her. So again, these are the organizations that support us. JAMS Foundation is Judges, Arbitrators, Mediators. And they gave us the initial funding. We were managed by the Association for Conflict Resolution in 2015, and then we're now managed by NAP. This is our website, peermediationonline.org. You can go there. We have lots of great free resources, videos, simulations. We have our free webinars we offer every month. We have a blog that we'll do specific topics from time to time. And then, of course, you can contact us if you have questions or you want additional training. So here quickly is our 4 goals. Number 1, we want to provide free resources for anyone who has a peer mediation program or looking into going into having a peer mediation program. For instance, useful links, the latest research, best practices, the peer mediation standards. I don't know if you know this or not, but peer mediation does have standards. Free curriculum, and of course media that you can use. Our second goal is to provide online training and basic peer mediation skills. So we teach schools how to teach their students basic peer mediation skills. We have 10 modules that we created that anyone can use as an addition to their peer mediation program or as just a basic introduction into peer mediation. Our third goal also is to help people that already have peer mediation programs to help their students practice, because we find in peer mediation that we'll have these great programs, but people are not, students are not able to practice their skills. So we help with that skill development. So we teach schools how to teach their students to practice their skills. We have some college mediator mentors who will watch the simulations and they'll give feedback, and then you of course will be able to keep your videos. I won't go into a sample 1 minute, but there is a 1-minute video you can view on our YouTube channel that shows you kind of a brief simulation. So there are 4 parts to the peer mediation simulations. Part 1 is we actually do the simulation, then we debrief it, we record it, and of course we'll have an online survey about the effectiveness of the simulation. The first time that we get with you, we will help you kind of do some free stuff, and then if you continue to work with us, then we will work out any additional costs that you might incur. So the first hour is our introduction and demo with you, the coordinator at the school, and your students that you're going to use. We really do a lot of hand-holding and assisting on this very first video that you'll do. Then, of course, our 4th goal is to provide online peer mediation services. And, of course, this is a lofty goal, and this is a future-focused goal. What we would like to do is we would like to be able to provide peer mediation services for schools that really don't have a peer mediation program to anywhere in the United States, well, anywhere in the world, using peer mediators. It might be a peer mediator here in Georgia, a peer mediator in Illinois, a peer mediator in California. It really doesn't matter. So we're actively looking for students who would like to maybe do this in the future, and not only high school and middle school students, but college-age students as well. And of course, student safety is always important when we're talking about online. the online peer mediation team doesn't have contact with your students. You carry out all the services in your school. It's under your direct supervision. So I want to make that clear. So again, we are looking for partners out there, schools, and anyone that might be interested in what we're doing with the online peer mediation platform. So we're looking for qualified trainers, mediation centers, and those who are experienced in peer mediation training. We're looking for middle schools, we're looking for high schools. Eventually, we're looking at elementary schools. And then in the fall, we'll be rolling out our college part, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So we offer some services. Of course, we offer peer mediation coordinator training. A lot of times we'll find that a coordinator will get a book and they'll try to institute a program. Sometimes it doesn't work so well. I can say that 100% because I was that person back in 1998. Mm-hmm. I had no clue what I was doing. But as I became more interested and really got training, I'm actually a mediator in the state of Georgia, I realized it was not just as simple as getting a book. So we will actually take you through A to Z, how to establish a peer mediation program, how to evaluate it. And it is blessed by ACR and the National Association of Peer Program Professionals. Let me go back one. We also do organizational conflict resolution training with organizations that seem to have conflict. We're actually right now, the OPMP team is working with a group in New York, and we have another proposal to another group. So we also do organizational conflict training. Of course, Ondine's specialty, the restorative teacher-student mediation, which we'll talk about tonight. She is the trainer for that, and so I won't steal her thunder, so she'll tell you more about that. This is what's coming in the fall. We will be presenting at the Association for Conflict Resolution Conference on mediator training for college students. We will train college students how to be mediator mentors for high school, middle, and elementary school students on our platform, and just actually in schools as well. So that will be our next rollout in our curriculum if you might be interested in that. So if you ever have questions, feel free to contact us. Also, you can view our past webinars on our website. We have a blog that will take you right to past webinars. We have a YouTube channel where you can view them all free, of course. And our next webinar will be October 24th at 6 p.m., hosted by Darcy Thompson, who is a mediator in Texas. So this is again, our website. Feel free to contact us, and we are looking forward to hopefully working with you in the future. And now, without further ado, we're going to get to Ondine's webinar. So let me do a quick review, and I have to, of course, put on my glasses because I can't see as well as I used to. So a little bit about Ondine. Ondine's a school psychologist, author, and educational consultant. She introduces restorative teacher-student mediation in a very easy, evidence-based intervention that reduces disciplinary actions and promotes wellness in a school community, and we all need that in our school community. Tonight, she's going to share how restorative mediation brings the teacher and the student together in a positive meeting to model social, problem-solving, and communication skills. Ondine will also explore with us tonight how mediation fosters a mutual understanding and empathy in the K-12 school, and discuss how mediation can also be effective to address student-to-student bullying and conflict, and to promote healthy relationships among adults in schools. And also, Ondine's going to share a little bit about her book tonight and tell us all about this world of restorative teacher-student mediation. So, Ondine, thank you so much for being on tonight.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, and thanks everyone for watching. I'm going to put my PowerPoint up, and let's see, and put this in view. Okay, so everything I go over tonight is also found in this book that I wrote, Restore the Respect, How to Mediate School Conflicts and Keep Students Learning. So you don't have to take notes, it's all in there. So I just want to kind of take you through a personal story, and that is about what I experienced as a school psychologist. And ask you the same thing. Did you ever hear in your career or in your observations in a school, a student say things like, my teacher hates me, or if he doesn't show me respect, why should I show him respect? or maybe a student complaining because, and say something like, my teacher sent me out and other people were talking, or even my teacher's racist. Now, when I talk about students, I'm talking about students, generally you can picture kind of a adolescent, maybe in middle school or high school, but everything I talk about today is also applicable to younger students. And have you ever heard a teacher say, you know, she refuses to do any work, she just doesn't care, or he doesn't show any effort, or she comes to class and puts her head down, or just simply, I'm all out of ideas. And then kind of my all-time favorite, which is the student who really loses it, who maybe curses the teacher out or gets suspended and then is sent and given the disciplinary consequence, but then is returned to class a few hours or days later and as though nothing happened. It's never really dealt with. And I know in life that that's not really okay. You can't just have outbursts and lose control and then just sort of slip back in. I mean, it's processed somehow or another, but somehow in school we don't do that. And then I think we've all seen how teachers can use the mechanism that's available to them, which is a DR. You write a discipline referral, you send the student to the office, but what ends up happening is that the same teacher will write a discipline referral over and over, often on the same student, and nothing changes. So I saw all of that too as a school psychologist for over 30 years. And, but kind of late in my life, in 2012, I earned a master's. I went back to school to earn a master's degree in education policy organization and leadership from the University of Illinois. And one of my motivations was that I've been a school psychologist forever, and I was kind of maybe needing to learn more about the big picture. And really what I wanted to do was go back to school and learn about quote unquote best practices, because I thought, surely a university will have all the answers and then I'll get some great information to bring it back to my school. Quick story, my first day of class, I was definitely the oldest student in the class, and I raised my hand and asked the professor, will we be learning about best practices? Well, she gave me a withering look and said, there are no such things as best practices. She said, best practices for whom? Who's the audience? Who's the school? What's the context of the building? What is your staff? Who are the resources? So she quickly let me know that really it's up to each institution, to each school to really look at their own people and their own staff and their own issues, and to individualize and customize their interventions. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. The other thing I did around that time of my life was take a 40-hour training in mediation from a local grassroots organization. And it was something about those two things percolating that made me want to use my skills at Centennial High School, where I worked, to address this teacher-student conflict problem that I'd been seeing my whole career. And I just, at that point, since there was going to not be a big resource book with all the answers, it was kind of put back on me, okay, I'm a school psychologist, how can I use my skills to help? So it so happened that I went to my high school that summer to clock some internship hours, and I saw a couple of administrators at a whiteboard kind of plotting out tiered systems of support, which we'll talk about in a minute. But just on a lark, I said, hey, there's something I'd like to try because I learned this really simple mediation technique. Can we try mediation with teachers and students at the high school? And they said, okay. Now, when I say the high school, it's a high school of about 1,400 kids, public high school in Champaign, Illinois. I name it in the book. I give all kinds of details. But this slide that you see before you is exactly how it was rolled out to teachers in the fall of that year. And this is what the slide said, that basically the school psychologist would do a mediation and particularly focus on if a teacher had 3 discipline referrals from the same to the same student. And that we would collect data and consider it a successful intervention if, after the mediation, no discipline referral was written from the same teacher after the mediation to the student. So it wasn't perfect. It was kind of like action research. Wasn't the end all be all, but we started to see that when it worked, it was really quick, really easy, and really amazing. So that's why I'm here with a lot of enthusiasm to share this very simple technique. So my goals this afternoon are to provide an overview of how to introduce teacher-student mediation in your setting, go over some data that we collected to illustrate the success of mediation and how we collected and analyzed the data, highlight that mediation really helps bridge racial and cultural divides and bring people together in all kinds of wonderful ways and discuss feedback and next steps. So despite what my professor said, there definitely are some best practices in schools. And we know that in an ideal classroom, students and teachers will treat each other with sensitivity and civility. That everyone's valued. Students are valued as individuals. There's no fear of put downs from anybody. And when conflicts arise, people will have ways to effectively communicate and problem solve. But we also know that classrooms are less than ideal. And research is showing us that Black males and students with disabilities are the most heavily impacted by discipline policies that remove them from the classroom. And differences in how teachers discipline Black and white students can actually contribute to racial disparities and spur repeated student misbehavior among Black students. There's a great TED Talk by an author named Adichie called The Danger of a Single Story, and I really want to recommend that everyone hear it because it's just beautifully presented. But she talks about how what happens in life so much is a single story, and in the case of a school, it could be, oh, the teacher doesn't care, or my teacher hates me, that one single story can replace true understanding. And what I found is that in the day-to-day practice of how schools are structured, often teachers and students want and improve relationships, but really lack the time and place or skills to develop the needed trust and rapport. And that schools aren't really built with, sort of time cordoned off to address these issues. But I think they're coming around now as we see many more restorative practices enter the schools. So when I started thinking about this, I wasn't alone, because all across the country, there was this awareness that we were losing students. You've heard the expression, maybe school to prison pipeline, that not only were kids dropping out, but even starting to be labeled as, getting kind of sucked into the prison pipeline because of misbehaviors that could be, get more elevated. And the other call to action was that we in schools were being challenged to use effective classroom management strategies that were responsive to our clientele, to the students we have from different cultures, and to really use positive disciplinary techniques that promote healthy school climates and interactions that's developmentally appropriate, meaning age appropriate. So here's a little preview. I really believe that mediation helps in this effort by boosting mutual understanding, fostering trust and empathy, promoting social emotional learning, also breaking negative cycles, because as I said earlier, just the repeated discipline, sending to the office over and over, it just really is very frustrating for everyone. Mediation also enhances student achievement. And what I like about it is that it's individualized, because I'm going to talk a lot about the fact that we don't know what students need. We don't know what a classroom or teachers need until we ask. And what I came to see after doing over 200 mediations is that no two people are alike, and you don't know until you find out. So I love that it's individualized. And lastly, it's efficient and free of charge. You can put this in a school using existing staff. I want to take a little aside just for a moment and talk about systems, because we hear a lot about systems like RTI or PBIS or MTSS or Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. I want to give a quick review of what we mean, because I didn't always understand what a system was either. I thought, look, we're all busy, we're all running around doing our jobs. What is a system talk? What does that even mean? Well, the way to kind of think about what we talk about in terms of interventions in schools is that most kids who come into a school will presumably respond to the structure of a school, to the rules and regulations and so forth. But when we talk about interventions such as mediation, it might be to that Tier 2, Tier 3 student who simply needs more support, perhaps more support in social skills, or more support in communication and problem solving skills, or more support in social emotional, coping, things like that. We know a lot more about students and trauma. So when you listen to this talk tonight, keep in mind that we're kind of addressing the students for whom traditional school discipline doesn't always work, who just need more understanding. And also very quickly, just to show you a little preview of collecting data. So this is an actual, it comes from a program called SWIS, SWIS, that shows by the months on the left, and it shows different interventions that we were doing at my school. You can see teacher-student mediation at the end. And I don't expect you to read everything, but the idea was that we were seeing who's using it, how often, and how will we know it's working. So at my school, we would meet every 2 weeks with an administrator. She would bring the data. We would enter the data through the month. And we use these meeting norms. And the reason I put them up here is because I really believe that going into any meeting in a school with some norms is a good thing, and particularly the one at the bottom that says, keep our discussions positive and focus on suggestions for improvement. And that's just a way of doing just that, because otherwise it's really easy for people to come together and just vent on all the things that are wrong. And this challenges everyone to keep positive, and I find that it really works. And what makes a strong system is, you know, and that's, again, using all the principles of response to intervention and positive behavior intervention and support, is to focus on prevention, to develop the needs at your building, to use your existing resources, and then to meet regularly and look at what the data is showing you, but also the freedom to modify what you're doing based on the outcomes. If something you're doing is kind of getting a 25% result, then maybe it needs to be tweaked or discarded altogether and your resources put to something else. Strong administrative leadership really helps this process. So I'm going to switch gears back to mediation and introduce you to teacher-student mediation. So mediation in general has comes from, you know, it's an age-old concept. It comes from the Latin, has a root from middle carrier, and it basically means to resolve or settle differences by working with a mediator, somebody who is going to help the conflicting parties mediate a dispute. So when we take this concept and apply it to teachers and students, why would we do that? Well, as I've said, the point is to improve understanding, to boost respect, and also to improve the self-esteem and individual effectiveness of each party, because it's just plain therapeutic for people to be heard, to be able to tell their full stories. And that in itself, just listening to people is so healing. And especially when you're talking about students, they don't expect that, and teachers also really value it. And so just to create a setting where people will be heard in a respectful way is very powerful. And also the point is to increase academic achievement and decrease disciplinary actions. Conflict in a school, or really in any system, can sap the joy out of a workplace or a school. Unresolved conflict, everybody knows, just doesn't feel good, and the results can be avoidance, shutting down, truancy if we're talking about students. It's just so powerful, and it just also can be rooted in a lot of misunderstandings, even you know, in class, cultural, or racial bias and misunderstandings. So what teacher-student mediation is, the way I use it and the way I write about it in my book, is a highly structured 50-minute meeting. 50 minutes was chosen because that's a typical length of a class period in a secondary school. And I really think 50 minutes is the correct time to allow for a teacher-student mediation, because what we're looking for is a safe space and time away from the classroom for the teacher and student to really expand their understanding of one another's perspectives and also develop trust and rapport. So the whole point of this is for a setting to model and encourage social communication, conflict resolution, problem-solving skills. Here's what it's not. It's not, and I used to do this, I was guilty of this many times throughout my career, is like, let's just get everyone together and let everyone tell their sides or see what really happened or who's telling the truth. While all that information is helpful, the mission of mediation is to restore respect between the teacher and student. And I'm not a dean of students, I'm not an administrator, I'm not investigating a crime, I'm not trying to see what really happened. What I'm designed to do is repair their relationship. The other thing it's not is to identify a perpetrator and victim and meet in order for the perpetrator to say sorry. Often apologies will come out spontaneously, but they are not required in this type of mediation setup. And I hope you'll learn more about why it's kind of more open as we continue. So the other ways that it's different than just getting people in a room to talk is the structure and how the mediator sets the tone. And I'm a little bit facetious here when I say the mediator is in charge, but in fact, when a mediator is, providing that structure, there's safety in it, and everyone sort of relaxes because they know that, there's some structure to this meeting. So when we do mediation, we follow the principles of mediation that are honored throughout the country and put out by the American Arbitration Association, which is impartiality, confidentiality, voluntariness, and self-determination. So what do we mean by impartiality? Simply, mediators do not take sides. We're there to listen, not to solve problems, evaluate solutions, or provide options. We're there to even out the communication because it is critical for both the teacher and the student to be perceived as having equal rights for dignity. Confidentiality, really important. Everybody needs to know that the mediator is not going to go out and blab to, in the teacher lounge about what went on in that meeting. If you're asked about what went on in the meeting, you can provide general information like, oh, it went well, or, oh, I think we got it resolved without going into the details, because people really need to know that what they talk about is private unless they themselves choose to share it. And this, of course, if we're working in schools, does not include things like child abuse or anything obviously that would need to be reported outside of the meeting. But if you're a mediator, and I'm talking to this audience as though you yourself might be a mediator, it is absolutely important that you're perceived as being trustworthy. Self-determination means that what people choose to bring up and talk about in that mediation is their choice. The mediation provides a structure and they're empowered to talk about what they want. And this also helps them feel more effective. And lastly is voluntariness. And I cannot stress this enough. Everybody has to come to mediation voluntarily and stay voluntarily. And as much as we want to encourage students, especially, oh, come on, just meet with Ms. Jones. It won't be, come on. It backfires. It really has to be something that the student willingly chooses to do. So how do we conduct teacher-student mediation? Again, I know that this is a webinar and it's a limited amount of time, but everything is in the book. And I also have some video demonstrations, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I'll just take you through the steps so you get the overview. So the first step is definitely to, just schedule it, get clearance that it's voluntary. I might be asked by an administrator to do a mediation, and often the administrators already talked with the teacher about whether they think that's a good idea or not. So I just simply email the teacher and try to schedule it. Say, make sure it's okay with them, and if so, when would be a good time. At my school, there wasn't a lot of time for advisory, so these would typically happen during the teacher's prep period, or lunch, or whole supervision period, one of those 3 times during the school day. They got coverage, and it was okay with the administrators that this happened. And if they were willing and brought their lunch into the room, they would simply eat during the mediation, and that was fine too. Students would, I would ask students the same thing. Are you willing? I would tell them what the process is and see if the time that was best for the teacher worked for them, and then schedule it and invite everyone to my office to begin. So for this part, I'm going to kind of go over the way it is, and I'm going to speak to you in the audience as though you're in my office now and you're about to have a mediation. So the first thing I'm going to do is welcome you with a smile. So welcome to this mediation. Please have a seat. I am so glad you're both here. I'm a big fan of mediation because I think it's a great way to resolve conflicts, clear the air, and allow people to move forward. It's also a way to learn things about another person's perspective. So the way mediation works is really simple. I will ask both of you the same question. What brought us here today? I ask that you speak only to me and not to each other. While each person speaks, I will take notes and ask clarifying questions. When one person is talking, the other person can just sit back, relax, and listen. It's amazing how much you learn just by listening, and especially things you didn't know before. Once each of you has spoken to me, I'll summarize what I've heard. I will then ask you to speak to each other and develop your plan to move forward. The rules to mediation are that only one person speaks at a time, and there are no interruptions or put downs. And there's 4 principles of mediation. As your mediator, I'm impartial, which means I don't take sides. The meeting is confidential. Everyone is here voluntarily. And the last principle is called self-determination. And what that means is that what you choose to talk about here is completely up to you. Is everyone okay with this? Are there any questions? Okay, good. So who would like to go first and tell me what brought us here today? And notice that I'm not saying tell your side or give your version, because I don't want to set up a sort of a conflict mode. What I am doing is I have a piece of paper with a line down the middle, one side for teacher, one side for student, and I'm writing down verbatim quotes because my job is to reflect and not interpret. So if they say they're upset, I write down the word upset. If they say frustrated, I write down the word frustrated. I'm not going to assume anything or assume what emotion they're conveying unless they say it. So the structure of the mediation, and this is really important, is that it doesn't matter who goes first, but sometimes they will turn and try to speak to each other, but have each person speak only to you at first. And this allows you as a mediator to set the tone and prevent the meeting from just recreating a back and forth dynamic in conflict that is kind of what they had before. And the other reason is because participants speak in a different voice when they speak to the mediator. Teachers don't use teacher voice, students maybe don't use their, frustrated voice, and it just sounds different, and it is different. And so that is a real important structure to enforce, is have each person speak only to you at first. And so basically you're just using your reflective non-judgmental listening skills and validating the person's point of view and just kind of encouraging them to express, what did bring us to this meeting from their perspective. I'll just let you read it. You're also pausing to summarize at various times, and this helps to kind of modulate the rhythm of the mediation so that someone isn't speaking too fast or too long, or if someone's kind of going, really lengthy, you can just, raise your hand just for a second and say, hey, can we just pause for a second? I just want to make sure I understand what you've said. You're saying X, and so forth. And that just kind of modulates the tempo and tone. Throughout the mediation, you are doing a lot of thanks and praise, because you really want to, make sure people feel good about being in this setting and to know that it takes courage to have difficult conversations. By the way, I just want to stop here just for a minute and say thank you. Thank you both for being here. It takes courage to have difficult conversations, and it's so cool that you're both here because you want to improve things. So thank you so much for being here. Now, when you're in the course of the mediation, there's often like a detail or an incident that got things off track. And what I like to do sometimes is say to the people, I hear what happened that was difficult, but let's go back to a time when things were better. What did that look like? Or it seemed like things had been going well. What was, the thing that kind of got things off track? Because it is kind of like in the details that people learn things they did not know before, because you can only imagine a teacher in a busy classroom, and no teacher is super person to pick up every detail. So there's things that people miss or are misread. So this helps that a lot. And also we want to, and this is the restorative part, where hearts are touched. We want to provide the teacher and student with an opportunity to identify feelings. Students don't always think about how teachers feel. They don't know much about the fact that teachers prepared the class or what their expectations were, just how it felt when the students didn't engage or how it felt when this student didn't engage. And also for the student to identify feelings, what was it like for them? And so you're writing down, again, their specific verbatim quotes. And when we're talking about younger children, it might be a good idea to do a pre-conference to go over different feelings and show them a feelings chart and, with different faces. So help them. And this is where the social skill building also comes in, to learn the names of different feelings to more precisely express themselves. This is really important. I call it mining for gold. In the course of the mediation, I learned that sometimes the conflict or whatever the issues were that brought them into the room were not as important as just rebooting that relationship with a positive start. And the best way to do that would be to mine for gold, to ask the teacher to say something positive or to share an observation about the student, something they appreciated. And, in the course of them telling you their story, you sort of slip that in at some point. And then when it would be the student's turn, same thing. Tell me something about, you like about the way Ms. Young teaches. This would be where you as a mediator would see body language change. Be like, because they didn't know that each other had these observations. And I had a teacher once, when I asked a student the question, what do you like about the way Ms. Weaver teaches? Or what do you like about Ms. Weaver that, as a teacher? And he said, oh, that's easy. She cares. And she told me later that she wrote the words "she cares" on a Post-it note and put it at her desk and told me that those 2 words were going to get her through the rest of the school year. So you never, can underestimate the power of these positive remarks. And they also do so much to dispel notions about mutual dislike. So mine for gold, mine for gold, mine for gold. Now, the other thing about these mediations is that people share vulnerabilities, and they often can share that they could have handled something differently. And that's both true for the teacher or the student. So when a teacher says, when I think back, I could have handled that differently, I could have handled that better, you want to, as a mediator, really validate that in front of the student, and vice versa when the student says, yeah, I was rude to Miss Jones and I shouldn't have said those things. And, so it's like, as a mediator, wow, that's really big of you to say that. And thanks for taking responsibility for your behavior that day. And thanks for your honesty. And again, reinforcing that nobody is forced to apologize. So when people do in these meetings, it kind of comes from the heart and it's sincere. And this is kind of the difference between, how sometimes we march students in to say to an adult, sorry. This is a lot more sincere, because in the course of the mediation and all the information that comes out, I think students kind of warm up and relax, and vice versa with teachers. And it does come out more naturally, and it's very moving. So going back to the structure, each person is speaking only to the mediator at first. So at the end of that person's full statements, you want to say, is there anything else you would like to say before we ask the other person to speak? And a lot of times you think they've said everything they want to say, but you ask anyway, and guess what? You'll always be surprised because they have more to say, but that's okay because it's a 15-minute meeting. So after each person has spoken, you will summarize each of their stories, and then at the very end, summarize both of their stories. But mainly in the summary, what you want to do is provide an overall humanizing but impartial summary that kind of recaps what happened with these 2 people and how they felt about it. Here's where you want to use your notes, so you don't misinterpret anything. I've had people say, do you have to write notes? I'd rather just use my memory. That's completely up to you. I needed notes. You also want to really re-emphasize the positive statements and the goodwill that's been expressed. You're going to smile and express lots of thanks and praise in your summary. This has been so helpful because we learned so much that we didn't know before. Thank you both again for being here today. It takes courage, and it showed real effort towards improving things. And guess what? Effort matters. At this point in the mediation, I'm going to ask you to speak to each other and develop some ideas about how to move forward. And this is where the mediator really takes a step back. And this is where I was so impressed by teachers, because they would just go to town with all kinds of like, oh, I'm so glad now I understand about this and that. And how about if we do this or that? And what do you think? And while you were talking, I was thinking of some ideas. And kids, by the way, are so moved that A, their teacher is even in there with them for 15 minutes. And B, is that so resourceful and caring. So again, the restorative part of this meeting is just like, wow, my teacher cares. And also for the teacher to see that the student is invested. And I would do mediations with the students who would be in the worst kind of trouble. And guess what? In this meeting, they had rise to the occasion. They were respectful and dignified to their teacher. each and every time, I never had a student be rude to a teacher in a mediation, that, you know, out of anger or anything like that, because it was such a dignified, respectful meeting, and everyone, you know, rises to that occasion. It's so fun to watch. So sometimes, a few times, you know, when you ask people to develop their plans, they kind of seem stumped. So like typical things that might come up, oops, where'd it go? Like one example is, what is the best way for this teacher and this student to communicate? You know, it might be that maybe the student's having a bad day. So this is just kind of a way for them to individualize that. Would it be a post-it, a note, or teaching, you know, even touch. Some students want to be touched, some students don't want to be touched. You know, just whatever it is. Like, and this would be for misbehavior too. Like, Johnny, if I see you're talking to your neighbor, what's the best way for me to redirect you so I'm not embarrassing you? Oh, can you just like write my name really small on the board? I mean, you know, two students will say the same thing. So this is really helpful. The students have a lot to say about where they sit in the class and who they work with. And this is where also they see that their teachers are very observant. Hey, I noticed that you worked really well when I had you in a group with John and Sue. Do you agree? Or do you want to be put with other people? Or maybe the student just wants to be seated by themselves. But this again is where you individualize that. Or maybe they just have some housekeeping. Maybe there's a test to make up, or maybe the student might need some extra tutoring on something, or maybe they make an arrangement to handle the student's restlessness or with a task or school job. So again, individualizing it and developing the steps that are going to work for those two. I toyed with the idea of producing a written plan or contract. It's really up to each person whether they want to do this. I found that sometimes people were just really happy in an upbeat mood and they didn't really like the idea of signing something right then and there. But what I ended up doing is just writing a follow-up email with a synopsis of their plan. And there's examples of that in the book, and also of contracts. So at the end of this, you thank the participants and praise them for being there. The communication was honest and respectful. It seems like you have a great plan to move forward. Great work. Let me know if you would like to meet again. I'm happy to help. And it's like, it's all good. So we were curious, like, what kind of impact does this have actually in a school? So I'm going to kind of go through these quickly, but show you 3 years of data. So the first year we introduced this intervention from that slide I showed you earlier in a school of about 1,400 kids, and all the demographics were in the book. I did 38 mediations, and of those mediations, 84% of the time that the teacher and student met, there were no further discipline referrals from the teacher after that mediation to the student. Most of the mediations came from administrators. However, most of the time, and I think best practice is for the administrator to consult and ask the teacher if the teacher would agree or think this is a good idea to do with the student. And by the way, parents love these mediations because it's a solution other than just a detention or something like that. And it's really an avenue to repair the relationship and improve things for the teacher and the student in the class. So parents really appreciated when an administrator would call home and say, oh, I'm sorry that, you know, I have to call you with some news. Your child had this, you know, problem, blah, blah, blah. You know, he might need to do lunch detention, because at the school where I work, they didn't remove the disciplinary consequence, but they augmented it. So they might say, yeah, I need to have him close lunch or just serve this detention or stay after school. And I'd also like to offer a mediation with the teacher and student. And I've already talked to Ms. Jones and she agrees, and this is what it is, so forth. So most of the referrals came from administrators. As you can see, most of the mediations are with the younger students in a high school. This is because by junior, senior year, hopefully conflicts have subsided, or our students have learned social and coping skills and communication skills. There was a few more males and females the first year who participated. And in a school where we had about 30% African-American students, and in the book has the layout of the demographics, but the vast majority of mediations were done with African-American students. And our demographics were that mostly white teachers, which is why I stress this as a positive intervention to bridge racial divides and to boost mutual understanding across racial lines. Year 2, pretty similar. Year 1 we did 38, year 2 we did 34, 76% responded. Pretty similar in terms of who referred to mediation. And by the way, we really encouraged our student services staff, counselors, social workers, to refer students to mediation who said things like, my teacher hates me. And a lot of times teachers themselves would ask for mediation because they knew that they wanted to improve a relationship with a student. So it wasn't always as a result of a discipline referral. It was sometimes because teachers saw this as a proactive way to improve their relationship. So by year 2, we had more balance between freshmen and sophomores because the sophomore dean that year was utilizing it as an intervention more. Pretty similar male-female split. Again, 76% were African-American students using this intervention and mainly white teachers. I show you year 3 because you see that by now it's kind of taken hold as an intervention. And so now that the numbers boosted to 57 total mediations. And this is what I covered in the book, the first 3 years. But there was subsequent years where I did 88 mediations because it just takes hold in a school culture because people see that hey, it's really helpful. Again, mostly from administrators, mostly freshmen and sophomores, more males, and mostly African-American students and white teachers. So when you kind of compare year to year, you see by year 3, you know, those jumps in the numbers and real similar findings in terms of the ages of students who use this and grades. Oh, sorry, this is gender and ethnicities. And also the yearly number of mediations with effective outcomes. And you can see that growth. I have an extensive survey results in the book, but for purposes of timing, and I know we're running out of time, I just wanted to show you that one of the survey questions we asked teachers was, did you see this as a positive step toward improving student behavior and learning? And 87% agreed. Not everyone loved teacher-student mediation, so there's some frank feedback that I go over, and but I don't have time here, but this is sort of of course, it's my favorite slide, so that's why I like to show it too. Students loved mediation. We did a survey of the students and asked them, you know, did you say what you needed to say? Do you feel you were understood? Did you feel you were treated with respect? And did you learn more about the teacher's feelings and thoughts? 100% of the students we asked said yes to this question. Did the teacher learn more about your feelings and thoughts? They all said yes or a little. Some of the sample comments before the mediation, how did you feel coming into it? As you could expect, you know, teachers, students would say like, I didn't feel like it would work, or thought I would regret saying something, or, you know, get it over with, or nervous, or I get the opportunity to be listened to. And then after the mediation, it's like, we don't have a problem, and helped, and I haven't gotten sent out of trouble since then, and we both understand each other and communicate better. So they really liked it. You know, even sometimes just getting a calculator, the plan worked, I got the calculator, I'm being listened to, things will be easier now, we get along better, we get along great. So it's really, really gratifying to see this. And then this is not my slide, this is a slide from the school that shows, and it wasn't just for mediation, but a real concerted effort to introduce tiered systems of support, that it matters, and that when adults organize in a building, you know, you see outcomes, and I talk about other systems of supports in the book, but you see that across demographics, kind of before and after the systems of support were introduced kind of in the 2011-2012 school year, you see some real nice growth. And suspensions also going down, again, across demographics in some real nice ways. So, you know, the future need is just to spread the word, and that's why I'm so happy to be here and speaking to you. And, you know, I'd love to train others on how to conduct restorative teacher-student mediation. Cynthia Morton said at the beginning, I'd also address student mediation and mediation between adults in schools. I really, we introduced student mediation at the school after a year and had excellent results. I write a chapter in the book about mediation between students because there's some slightly different things you tweak, and they're shorter usually than 50 minutes. And also you really need to screen out the two students to know, you know, that they're going to be appropriate candidates because it's voluntary. But again, you collect the data, you see if it's working, and other future needs are, you know, to always strengthen the communication with parents, staff, and students and follow up. But mainly to expand the use of restorative practices in school, and I really believe that this mediation is a way to do that. I have a video of a full teacher-student mediation that I conducted, as well as a student mediation, a mediation between two students on YouTube. So here's a link, or if you don't want to type all those things in, you just can Google Ondine Gross YouTube and it'll pop up. It's about a 40-minute video. And that's it. And I welcome your comments and questions. And I know some of you will be watching this after the live presentation, so feel free to email me. And I'm delighted to work with online peer mediation program and to do further trainings with you. And you would contact, you know, OPMP or Cynthia Morton, and we would, or me directly, and we'll set that up. It's wonderful to be able to do things online and to reach a wide audience and even an international audience. So I want to thank you so much for your time, and I welcome your questions and feedback.
Thank you so much, Ondine, and thank you for being on tonight. And again, if you are interested in more training, please feel free to reach out to Ondine. You can also reach out to us on the online peer mediation platform. We can definitely contact you and talk about those possibilities. So, Ondine, any closing messages before we end our webinar tonight?
No, but I just want to say, if anyone is watching this, it's because you probably are curious about how to bring restorative practices in your schools. And we know it's not always easy. It's not always the culture of a school. But I think the strength that we bring is we've walked the walk in schools. Cynthia and I talk about that a lot, is we know where pockets of resistance might be, but we also know how to address things. And because it's not just like bringing in a Band-Aid, it's really sort of kind of introducing some different ways of thinking in school culture. So we have a lot of sympathy, and I was fortunate enough to discover this way as kind of a one tool. But I really respect anyone who's watching this and seeking any tool, and I'm happy to help, and I know you are too, Cynthia.
Yes, absolutely. Well, everyone, thank you so much for viewing tonight. Again, follow up with us if you have questions, comments, you desire training. We will definitely help you. Ondine, thank you so much for being on this evening. And guys, we will see you in October.